So let's get started building a farmhouse table. These things look a little more complicated than they actually are. I'll show you how step by step how I build them. They're very strong. I've got one in my house. I've had it in there for a year now and it's held up extremely well. And what we're working with will be pine 2x8 for the top and Douglas fir 4x4s for the base. What I do is I use 2x4s and these 4x4s. If you're gonna make benches to match your 2x4s, if you're staining everything, then your 2x4s and this Douglas fir won't match because it's pine 2x4s and Douglas fir 4x4s. So keep that in mind if you're staining. I'm gonna be painting my base on my benches and this table. The benches will be a separate video. But for this table, I'm using Douglas fir. We're gonna paint the base a biscuit white or some off-white, and then we're gonna stain our tops a dark walnut. Get started, I'll let you see my plans here. You can pause that, whatever you need to do, print that off. You'll have the basic layout for the frame or the table base. So my tabletop will be 5 feet. The base will actually be 4 feet in length. These, the long pieces, will be 41 inches by 26.5 wide. So I'm building a 5-foot farmhouse table. For the tabletop, the base will be 4 foot because I want 6 inches overhang on each. For the width of my frame, it's gonna be 26.5 inches. They'll be cut on 45s. Let's just get started. All these measurements and stuff's not gonna do anything but cause me to get confused until we get started. So let's get started. I'm gonna cut these down to the lengths we need. Here I'm cutting out my 4x4s for the legs. I'm cutting the risers first, and then I'm gonna cut the cross pieces. Those are 45-degree angles. Cut to those measurements you just saw in the picture previously. So we've got our pieces cut out for both ends of the frame. The stretchers and the bracing we don't have cut out yet. But I build these first, and then I tie them all together with the stretchers and the bracing. So you should have 8 of these cut out. These little 9 3/4 inch blocks. 4 of these that are 26.5 inches long, and then the risers should be 20 3/4 inch tall. So basically what we're gonna have this sitting on the floor. Actually, we're gonna cut some 1x4s right here and attach them down here for feet. But this will sit on the bottom. You'll have your riser right in the middle. This will sit on top right in the middle, and then your cross bracing will go here. Now, if you wanted to make a wider table than I'm making, you would just widen these out and make these longer. But based on this width that I'm building, this is what I'm using. So when everything's tied together, you'll see that it'll be like this right here. Okay, I'm not using any special joinery other than pocket holes and just regular screws. And what I've been doing on these tables is I'm gonna pilot drill 3 holes and drive 4-inch screws down through here into this with wood glue. And then these, what I'll do is I'll countersink some screws here and then drive a 3/8 inch dowel in there and then trim that off flush. So that's what we're gonna do now. Now we want to put this in the center of these. This here is 26 and should be a little over a 1/2 inch long, right? Let's check my measurement. This is just barely over 26.5. So what I did was I marked 13 1/8 this way, and then come this way and mark 13 1/8. And what I need to do is just mark 13 1/4. But that's how you can find center. That way you'll see the 8th mark here. You know that one was an 1/8, and you just split the difference, and you'll find center there. And this one's 13 1/4 is the center, and so. From there, we know that these are 3.5 inches wide, just under 3.5 inches wide. So I always it's easier if you lay your tape down like this and use the 12 there as a 0. So basically we're just zeroing out. I know these are 3.5 inches wide, so I need to go 1 3/4 inches both ways. So it'll be at the 10 1/4 mark this way, and then the 13 3/4 mark this way. And that gives us 3.5 inches here. And then I'll mark the lines there so I can carry them all the way around. You lay that up there and check it. You should be able to see the line on both sides. So to carry it around, I just flip it over and line that mark up. And then we have that's where our post goes. So we're gonna do this the same way. You line these up flush. If they're the same length, it should be flush there. And then just use those marks you've just made and transfer them over to this one. So I have these 4-inch screws. Obviously this doesn't go all the way through, but these are self-tapping screws. So what I did is I got a drill bit that's just shy of the diameter of the screw. And I'm gonna drill 3 holes in each one of these, which will be my pilot holes for those. And I'm angling it slightly, that way we're sure that the screw, when you put the screw in, it's gonna angle into the wood and not out. Do you wanna bust it? Now I've got a countersink bit here, and this will countersink at about 3/8 of an inch. See, it's countersunk in there pretty good. So that actually gives us, when the screw is all the way in, it's not going to be a ton of holding power there, but the glue with the screw is plenty. I've got that table in there, I've moved it around quite a bit, and I've never had any issues. So, however, build at your own risk. So I'm not liable if yours busts out or whatever, just kind of giving you how I do it. This may not be always the right way, but it's my way. Well, I go ahead and preset those screws. I know this is end grain, but I like to use glue on this stuff. It helps bond everything together. And I go pretty generous with the glue here. You should get a little squeeze out around the edges. And this is just a 36-inch Irwin clamp that I'm using here. A rubber mallet, get everything lined up. The line should just show on each side. Now, what I like to check for here is that this side's flush and the other side. So once I tighten down on that clamp a little bit, I pull it off the edge and check visually and by feel. Make sure everything looks level. It could actually use to be bumped down a little bit. And the thing about these fur 4x4s and stuff, they have rounded edges, so you're gonna have a gap there unless you rip the edges off all of them, which I did not do. I like to drive the one that's in the center first and then the 2 ones on the outside. And got that side complete. I'm just gonna flip it over and do the exact same thing on the other side. If you got a flat surface to work on, like this table, you just make sure both of these are laying flat at the same time. You don't want one flat and one kicked up like that. If it does kick up a little bit, it's not the end of the world, but it just makes your life easier if everything's square, because when you go to putting these on, you want everything to fit nice and tight. As tight as they're going to because of the rounded edges, that is. You can see those screws are in there about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. Now it's time to assemble those legs. I'm starting out drilling my pilot holes in the center. I drill 3 of those, angle them into the board instead of to the edge. And I just use some wood glue, my Irwin 36-inch clamp, get everything secured in place, make sure everything's flush, and then I drive those screws in there. 3 on each end, and they'll be assembled. Now I'm gonna give everything a sand. I start out with 60 and then down to 120. I sand each of those cross pieces or those braces separately. I'm gonna sand each one of those, and I'm gonna sand both of my table legs. Once everything is sanded, I gotta put a coat of paint on each piece individually. I'm only painting in the corners on the legs so that when I get everything assembled, the inside of that corner there is completely covered with paint. That way, when you go to paint the whole table, you don't have to try to get in that little gap. If you don't paint it here, it's near impossible to get everything in there coated just right and make it look right. So I highly advise to paint this before you put everything together. So let's give you a close-up of what's going on and how I'm actually attaching these angle braces. So you see I've already painted, like I talked about earlier, and these are gonna sit in there like that. So what I've done is I've taken my combination square, I've got it set to 1.25 inches, and what I'll do is I'll mark down 1.25 inches for 2 holes and over 1.25 inches for the same 2 holes. And then once we get that on all 4, I'll take my center punch and a hammer, put a little indentation there. And that gives your drill bit something to bite into so that you're not just trying to, it's not gonna walk on you. So that helps out quite a bit. And these don't have to be perfectly exact because you're gonna sand them smooth once those dowels are in, but getting them close surely helps. So I've got a countersink bit. This is a 3/8 inch drill bit at the top for my countersink. Center punch these 2 holes. If you don't have a center punch, you can use a nail. It works the same. So what I like to do is set it in place and hold it as tight as I can. So I'm drilling at about I don't know if that's a 90, and that's a nice, so probably a 45 into the stock. And I just drill it until it touches, the countersink touches. Now I'm going to change bits, and this is a Craig, just a Craig pocket hole bit. It's a 3/8 inch bit. If you have a 3/8 inch bit, you can use that as well. I've got it marked with blue tape. It's actually moved up a little bit on me, a little deeper than I want it. So you can just, this is just painter's tape. You can use duct tape, whatever you need. Still holding it in place, approximately the same angle. All right. So that's about a 1/4 inch deep. So you can see I got about a 1/4 inch deep hole there, and we got it pre-drilled. That one come out a little deeper, but that's okay. So what I'm gonna do now, wood glue. This is Titebond 2 in a Titebond 3 bottle, but it's Titebond 2. Put you some glue on there. You can brush it out, smooth it out with your finger, whatever. Put that back in place. So I'm using 2-inch screws, just star drive screws. Nothing fancy about those. The first one I just get it started, but I don't set it because I don't want the thing to kick out on me or move. And then I go to the opposite side top. Set that one. So we got 4 screws attached. You can probably just do 2 with wood glue. I've always went with 4, so kind of stick with what I know. Now these little dowels, you can buy a pack of these dowels. These are Woodpecker brand on Amazon. These are 25 or 3/8 inch dowels by 12 inches long. I can make a bunch of these plugs of those, and they're very inexpensive. If you've got Amazon, I'm dropping links to all this stuff in the description, so you can check that out. Put wood glue on there, and I just take a hammer until you feel solid when you knock it in there. And if you cut them right, and if everything works out right, it should just be a little bit sticking up. Sometimes the holes will get a little deep. If it goes in there too far and you got an indentation, then you're gonna wind up having to putty it or try to get that thing out or drill it back out. It's better to have them a little long than too short. Feel like that one's in there much at all. It is because I got the impression of the screw on there, so I don't think that screw is fully set. That's right, I never went back and set it, remember? You guys probably caught that. And there we go. Now it's set in there right. Nothing fancy about putting glue on a dowel. I just goop it on there. You know what I didn't do on this one, like I've been doing? Take my orbital sander. Take that orbital sander and just knock off that where the drill is splintered a little bit. Everybody seen my other dowel? There you have it. If I was staining this, I wouldn't be as liberal with that glue because I wouldn't want all that glue to have to contend with when I go to stain it because it'll actually discolor it. So I'll be a little more conservative with the glue, and that's how I get them in there. Once I got them set, take this flush trim saw. I also got this on Amazon. I think it was $15 or $20. It's extremely sharp. It's just a pull saw. So you just pick one of your dowels, pull it to you. And you can see I got into that brace just a little bit. I can sand that off no problem. Sand it back smooth. So if you get into that, don't concern yourself too bad with that. Try not to, but sometimes it's hard to do. And there you have it. Once you got them sanded or cut, trimmed, and sanded, they come out smooth. You can't feel where they are. And then, like this piece here, you see it's got a little splintering there, and that sawdust is trapped in there where I just sanded it. So you can just take a pocket knife or anything kind of sharp and just get that sawdust out of there. Take your air blower, blow it out of there, which is what I'll do before I putty it. Put a little bit of putty in there, let that dry and sand it smooth, and you'll be good to go. All right, it's time to cut our stretchers to the measurements shown in the picture at the beginning of the video. We'll cut 2 stretchers, and this is going to join our 2 legs together. First, I drill pocket holes. I drill 2 on each end, and then 1 on one side of them. So basically, there's 3 pocket holes. Right now, you're looking at the table upside down, so we're going to put the pocket holes facing the bottom, and then what will be the back of the table. You can see there's 1 pocket hole right there at the top that you can see. That just keeps everything from rotating. I put the 2 in the bottom and 1 on top. Use that Craig R3 to drill in these 4x4s. That's a great little handy Craig tool, pocket hole tool to have. Once I get that top one on there, I'm gonna move these clamps down, pocket hole this one in place with 1 screw on each end, flip it over, and then I can put the pocket holes from the other side in, the 2 on each side. These stretchers, I hold them up there and mark them in place, and then I go to the miter saw and cut the length I need. And I cut them a little long, and then I kind of sneak up on that cut to make sure they're a perfect fit there. Now I'm going to attach these angle braces with 2.5-inch pocket hole screws. Semi-screwing into the top and then to the bottom. And then I just use the Craig plugs, paint grade plugs. Work fine here. If they don't fit in there exactly right, you may have to take a little hammer and bump them in. And then after they're in there, you take your sander and sand it. If you have anything to fill, you can use putty. Just a little wood glue, and those plugs are all in there. Time to attach the feet to the table, so I lay it down upside down. And once that's upside down, I've got 1x4. I cut 3.5 inches long, so you have a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square. I drill some pilot holes in there, and then 3 pilot holes per foot, and then I just put 1.25 inch screws in there. Just be careful that you don't drill too close to that 45. After that's done, I take my router with a 1/4 inch roundover bit and I round over the edges of all those. Just keep them from splitting later on. We need to do prep for the installation of the tabletop. Once that's complete, we want to prep for the installation of the tabletop. So I've got my edge guide on my palm router, and all I'm doing is using an 1/8 inch straight bit, and I'm just drilling or cutting slots for my Rockler tabletop fasteners. And then everybody's favorite, sand. We sand this thing down to 120. Once it's sanded, I pick this heavy beast up and move it over to the paint station, aka 2 sawhorses. And I put 2 coats of Sherwin-Williams stain blocking primer on there. I'm using that Home Right sprayer. That thing works great. And then after that, I'm going to put 3 coats of Sherwin-Williams Pro Classic Biscuit White. Base is finished. We are ready to start working on the tabletop. I'm using 2x8s. I'm going to use my planer to plane these down. This is the first time I've ever used a planer on a project. I just got this planer. So if you don't have a planer, don't fret about that part. I've built plenty of tables without this. It's just harder to get that tabletop flat all the way across the top. You wind up having to sand a lot more. Once that's done, I'm just going to mark out where I want my pocket holes. I think I'm going to put 5 in there. And then I'm just going to get Craig K5 jig, drill those pocket holes, and get ready to assemble this table. Once the pocket holes are drilled, I got to fill my glue bottle up there. I get everything, check and make sure they're flat. I'm jointing on the table saw. I've got a video, I'll link a card above if you've never seen it. It's how I joint my boards. But once that's they're jointed to the way I want them, or they're going to be flat, we just use wood glue, that Irwin clamp, and pocket hole screws. And I'm just making sure on the other side that what's going to be the top, everything's coming out as flush as I can get it. All right, just using my Craig rip cut to trim the ends up. I cut them about 6 or 8 inches long total. So here I'm just ripping about 3 inches off each end so that I get a 5-foot table. Just make sure that your ends are square all the way across. This rip cut works great for that. And I take my rigid router, it's just a palm router, trim router, 3/8 inch round over bit. I go all around the top and the bottom edge, all the way around, and get that rounded over edge. That way there's no sharp edges. And I take my DeWalt variable speed 5-inch sander, sand everything with 60 grit, and then I come back with 120 grit. I don't go any finer than 120. I just make sure I've got a nice smooth surface there to stain. Once we're done with the sanding, I wipe it all down with a tack cloth, and then we go with this Minwax pre-stain conditioner. I think this stuff is great, especially for pine. I've got more than just the tabletop going here, but tabletop's in the foreground, the 2 benches and some other stuff in the background. Once that, I let that dry for at least 30 minutes, sometimes 45. I want to make sure it's all completely dry. I flip that tabletop over. I do the bottom first, and then I flip it over again and do the top side. This is Minwax Dark Walnut, in case you're wondering. Let that set for 15-20 minutes, and I come back and wipe it all down. Coat I'm using General Finishes Armor Seal. I use Old Blue Jeans as my cloth. I just use a new one on each coat, new piece. I wipe it on, let it dry 2 or 3 hours. Take some fine grit sandpaper, sand it down lightly, wipe that off with a tack cloth, and then put another coat on, let that dry. Just repeat the process 3 times. It's so easy to put on, it doesn't leave streaks. I highly recommend it. Starting to put my tabletop together, so I lay the top on the frame. You can see the slots cut there. I'm using Rockler tabletop fasteners. You can get those on Amazon or from rockler.com. They're Z-clips, so one side you get that goes into the slot we cut earlier, and then the other side you screw into the tabletop. Use a tabletop fastener versus just screwing straight into the tabletop from the underneath. It allows for the tabletop to expand and contract naturally. That way it doesn't bust on you later. Today I want to show you how I make this matching farmhouse bench to go with your farmhouse dining table. Hey, if you like this video, I'd appreciate it very much if you would share it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Comment below, let me know if you like what you saw or if you'd make any changes to it. If you want to see some of my other videos, you can check out some other build videos here, and then any recommended videos will go here.